Look, I honestly think from a lot of stuff has gone on from a psychological perspective. I
Mhm.
find the whole situation, I find the psychology of it all far more interesting than the
Yeah.
virology or epidemiology or anything else. And I think what we have now, I think the reason why people are even trying to memory hole it is because number one, I think, look, if you've injected something into your bloodstream and it's potentially dangerous or harmful or has harmed people, if you did it yourself, let alone you advocated that other people should do the same or even tried to force or bully people to, then that's a lot of, that's too much for most people to bear and to be open about, right? I think there's also the degree of ego protection. I think if you've been running around saying that anyone who doesn't, if you were running around in 2021 and early 2022 saying that anyone who doesn't take this thing is an idiot, is an anti-vaxxer, is stupid, is anti-science, is whatever, and then it turns out that they possibly had some good points or that they were, correct in some cases, then again, I don't think most people's egos can, I just don't think most people's egos can deal with that. So I think instead people would rather pretend it's just say, hey, the science changed, it wasn't me. And oh, I never said all those horrible, awful, nasty things that I said about other people and how they should lose their rights and lose their ability to live normal lives. So I'm just going to pretend that none of this ever happens. And, I understand that psychologically. I think of
But wait a minute,
all,
you have to admit that's pretty unique because people, I think, more readily admit other shortcomings. People will say, well, yeah, I was a drug abuser and it was a mistake. I was an alcoholic. I committed a crime. It was a mistake. I think another piece of very unique psychology here is it's now known this stuff doesn't leave the body.
mm,
So the messenger RNA doesn't look like it breaks down. The spike protein is in the body. As long as we keep looking, we keep finding it. People are staying, they feel sick for a long period of time. There's a paper by Lee and colleagues showing little micro blood clots floating through the retinal veins and arteries for 2 years after these shots. I think what's going on, it's not like, admitting a flaw, like, I had an affair, or I was an alcoholic. They're thinking to themselves, oh no,
mm,
I took these shots and I bought the farm. Now everybody is in a relative state of personal terror. This is
yeah,
what's keeping people quiet. I had a kid come in my office last week. He's a young kid, went to college, came down to see me. He looked me in the eye deadpan and he said, Dr. McCullough, am I going to have a cardiac arrest? And I think that is the subconscious play going on in everyone's minds right now, and that's explaining the behavior. No one will come out and tell you that they're on the 7th shot. No one will come out and tell you, I took these shots and I regret it and I want to take action. They're in this kind of state of
I,
overall
yeah,
panic.
I've had a small number of people say that to me privately. But I think that as long as the establishment, including the political class, including the media, all the people who, pushed and promoted and forced this thing on people, they're not willing to admit any type
Mhm.
of error. They're not even willing to draw the obvious connections. Look, at this point, I mean, I personally know people who I know young men who were in good shape, who took the
Mhm.
shot and were hospitalized, heart
Mm.
attacks, myocarditis. Like, it's real. Like, I don't know the official numbers, but of the people I personally know, let alone friends of friends, I personally know people where that situation happened, right? And someone else might be like, hey, well, I also personally know people who were, young and healthy and in good shape who had a really rough time with the virus itself, right?
Mhm.
And I can acknowledge both of these things, right? Both of these realities. Sure, most people were okay and seem to be okay regardless. But these situations happen, and in these cases, even when they go to the hospital, the doctors themselves don't even want to draw any potential connection between these things, right? That we had that whole situation. It was what, 2021, 2022, where lots of athletes, around a particular time were having heart attacks and were dropping on the field and this and this. And you're supposed to sort of completely suspend your brain and think that there's no no even possible connection. Like I'm just there thinking, okay, isn't this something that should at least be investigated, right? Like I can't say 100%, and I wouldn't say 100% every single one of these cases, it's this, it's the jab, it's the jab. Like, I'm not intellectually dishonest in that sense, but I'm like, okay, well, some of them, like, are we going to just pretend there's no connection here at all? And it's just this sort of mass level denial. And
well, aren't
scary.
some of these psychological processes, they're contiguous with what was happening before the vaccine? We saw things that weren't making sense. People weren't following their common sense. Let me give you some official numbers so you can your audience can have them.
Please do.
So our CDC vSafe, which is the CDC's safety database that people self-report how they're doing on their cell phone. 10 million people, signed up and did this program. 7.7% of Americans who take the shot in the next day or two end up in the ER or they're hospitalized. 7.7%. That's how toxic this is. So let me tell you, the shot is a doozy, and they get hospitalized for a whole variety of things. But can you imagine a shot where 7.7% chance you're going to get so sick you can't even survive? You got to go to the hospital. That's the first data point. 2 prospective cohort studies, one by Mansugian and the other one by Mueller, Asia and Switzerland respectively, show when you measure everything at baseline and then in follow-up, 2.5% of people who take the shot get heart damage, myocarditis. The number is 2.5%. Now, in terms of athletes dying, a paper by Polykritis and myself, I know because I'm one of the most published people in COVID, so I'm very active there. In a stable period before the pandemic, the rate of athletes dropping in the European leagues, pro and semi-pro, age under 35 active players, that's the restriction here, 29 per year before COVID. Now that number after the vaccines is 283 per year annualized. It's about a 10-fold increase. What we know, paper by Holscher and colleagues, I know because I'm the senior author, shows conclusively that by autopsy, the myocarditis can be fatal. Period. It's fatal.
Yeah.
So the FDA says the COVID-19 vaccines cause myocarditis, where it have 800 peer-reviewed papers on COVID-19 vaccine-induced myocarditis. And you're right. The next athlete who drops or the next person who comes in with a myocarditis syndrome, doctors and nurses and people are looking at these patients and saying, it's not the vaccine.
Yeah.
And people are saying, I don't trust you. I can't believe you. At this stage, I can't believe that people are denying the fact that it's the vaccine. And I think the reason why they're doing it is because they psychologically, they can't handle it. They took the shots themselves. They can't handle this.
Yeah, it's scary.